My first stop out of Salt Lake City was the Utah Data Center. This is the brand new nerve center of the U.S. government's telecommunications surveillance program. If the National Security Agency wants a copy of your email, your phone call, your text message, or your online activity, this is where they put it. The warehouses here are so big that they cover what used to be an airfield, and they're packed to the brim with hard drives and servers. The telecommunications of the entire world could fit on these shelves. That's the point. It's one of the latest examples of the federal government bringing an enormous networking project to the West, along with money, jobs, and infrastructure. It's the kind of project that keeps the West running, but like so many aspects of modern life here, it clashes spectacularly with the Western ideal of rugged individualism. It's hard to be John Wayne when your paycheck depends on a totalitarian government surveillance program. That's the way it goes. Of course, this surveillance depends on the networks working in the first place, and I was having some trouble with that.
My phone is getting no reception at all. It hasn't for several miles. My GPS is also picking up no signal whatsoever. And I'm on the side of a very busy road at rush hour in the dark with no shoulder and bridges across rivers and culverts to get over.
My last stop in the valley was Brigham Young University, where I spent 7 of the most emotional hours of my life talking online with a friend 2,000 miles away and attended a lesson in British history.
Remember the 5th of November.
Protestants.
Yeah! On fire.
That's what you get, Guy Fawkes.
At Spanish Fork, the roads diverge. I was heading southeast toward Santa Fe, but if I'd gone southwest, I would have reached Las Vegas and eventually LA. This was the turning point in the old Spanish Trail between New Mexico and the California coast. Centuries of expeditions trying to string together the most promising native trails produced a route that remained so difficult it was only commercially viable as a mule trail for a few decades in the early 19th century. I'd be following in those hoofprints for the next 600 miles.
Pulling out behind me are 2 highway patrol cars. And the officer in one of them just told me that the stretch of highway up ahead here, Highway 6, going up to Soldier Summit, was at one point the 3rd deadliest stretch of road in the United States. So, armed with that cheerful thought, I'm going to try to find a good place to sleep well before dark so that I'm not worrying about getting run over by a pair of headlights. Well, this is Soldier Summit. I'm probably going to go down a few miles before it gets truly dark and then put up a tent and hope to hit Price tomorrow afternoon or evening, depending on how things go. And then I'll be truly on my way into the deep desert at long last.
It took the introduction of paved roads and metal rails to finally make the line of the old Spanish Trail a major freight corridor. One part of the picture is through traffic bound for Canada, Mexico, and points in between. Another part of the picture is resource extraction, with especially close ties between the railroads and the mining industry. This goes back into the 19th century. The vast carrying capacity of the railroads allowed the transportation of one of the few resources the West has in great abundance, rock, to the booming cities of America's heavy industrial age. In this part of Utah, the key resource is coal. With coal, you can mass manufacture high-quality steel, you can power a steam engine, and you can generate electricity for lighting and instantaneous long-distance signals. With coal, you can build a railroad. At Castle Gate on the Price River, you can see a few of these pieces lined up in a row, from the mines to the railroad to the power plant, as well as the memorials, because mining remains a dangerous and destructive business that flourishes in marginal places. The West is littered with ghost towns where mineral resources were discovered in the middle of nowhere, exploited pell-mell, and then either exhausted or rendered unprofitable by fluctuations in the markets. Often, the railroad brought the men who worked the mine, it brought the supplies required for the rudiments of a town, it hauled the mineral spoils out, and it hauled the men away again the moment business went bad, to start all over again somewhere else. Mass mobility of men and cargo makes a boom-bust economy possible, or possibly inevitable. Rolling stone gathers no moss.
Scenic Limited again through ebony darkness. into Utah's great Carbon County coal region. Enough coal to supply the entire United States for 250 years. It is estimated almost 196 billion tons of coal remain to be mined. And the fact that 45% reaches out-of-state markets makes for an endless parade of coal-laden gondolas up and down mountain grades. Utah coal, black magic that fires the furnaces of progress.
I recently noticed that I seem to have developed some kind of fungal skin infection. Now, in a normal indoor life, at least a normal indoor life in this country, the way you deal with this would be by applying twice a day an antifungal cream, washing your clothes regularly with antifungal soap. Within a couple of weeks, you should start to see the vanishing of the symptoms. Keep it up for another couple of weeks to make sure it's eradicated, and you're good. The problem is, out here on the side of the highway, in the desert, that's patently impossible. However, there is one thing available to me that's not available to most people living a settled indoor life, and that is sun. Well, that's 15 minutes. That's enough for today.
I have no idea what I'm eating right now. I know it's a muffin, but I also know that it's bright green and I feel like it shouldn't be.
The stretch of highway that I'm walking on right now, I think, points out pretty well the difference between the idea of the American West as a place of wide open spaces and what you actually feel when you're traveling through it the way I'm traveling. Where I'm walking and where all these cars and trucks are driving, you get a marvelously strong impression of civilization. What with the roadway itself and the cordage that's strung out along the side of the roadway down in the grass, and the trash, like the beer bottles, or all the broken pieces of tire treads that are strewn out in the gravel just to the side of the roadway. And then there's the barbed wire fence that runs almost without interruption the entire length of the roadway and prevents someone like me from actually getting out into any of that wide open space. So yes, it's big. Yes, the sun is bright. Yes, the air is clear at night and the stars are extraordinary to see. But this is not a wilderness. Seen from the road, the whole landscape is an extension of the road.
The intersection of Highway 6 and Interstate 70 was a place I'd been dreading ever since I first saw it on a map. It's 4 miles west of the town of Green River, and anyone driving into town would use the interstate to get there. As a pedestrian, I couldn't do that, which seemed to require a 30-mile detour on a dirt road I never found. So, I found a gap in the barbed wire and followed some dirt bike ruts across the open desert.
These last 2 days' excursions off onto these dirt frontage tracks has been a good first-hand education and why the development of paved highways was such a big deal for this part of the country, and why the wheel didn't really catch on in North America for a long time.
After a night by the gas station in Thompson listening to the cashier tell me tales of his life of crime, I met A.J. Rogers, who oversees the maintenance crew in charge of this stretch of Interstate 70. As dry as the landscape looks around here, it turns out their number one enemy is water.
I've got Huntington Maintenance Station over here. We had a large forest fire go through, and thousands and thousands of acres were burned up in these beautiful mountains. Then every time it rains, all kinds of boulders and dead trees and mud just drips down and buries our road. I mean, this summer it's happened 9 times up there on that 10-mile stretch of road. And that crew over there, that's all they've done pretty much for 2 years. But as far as real events that really stick in our head, there was the winter of '89 when we actually had to close the freeway out here because the snow got so deep and the wind was blowing so hard and everything was iced up. And I remember having to leave my state pickup here and take my own 4-wheel drive to get out to a stockpile location out near the Colorado state line, and then having to work my way through snow drifts overland to get to a load to go dig my stuck 4-wheel drive back out and then start trying to dig snow plows out. And it was just nuts. There was cars off everywhere. And then it turned 30 below zero over the next week. We had ice this deep on the freeway we couldn't do anything with other than trying to shade the potholes out of it that would form from chained up trucks. And we must average 16 hours a day for 8 or 10 days straight, didn't we? Yeah. Trying to get back to black pavement. I started for UDOT 31 years ago. I've been working construction for 8 or 9 or 10 years. That was a good job in the summer, but you were frequently laid off in the winter. One around the 1st of December, first week of December, 1982, I came home from some little project I was doing, and my wife and the foreman at this maintenance station told me that I was going to work here next Monday. And I says, no, I'm not. I'm not going to be a state road. Now, 31 years later, I'm still here.
When I walk beside her, I am a better man. When I look to leave, I always stagger back again. Once I built an ivory tower to worship from above, and I climbed down to be set free, she took me in again. She's a big house, big love and big people, in a big hard Sorry, it's gone.
In the mid-20th century, Moab was a classic example of a boom-bust mining town. Half a century down the road, it's become a classic example of a new West dependent on long-distance tourism. I talked with Ken Davey, an economic development specialist with the municipal government, about the town's changing fortunes and prospects.
This area was a heavy area for uranium. And the United States, following the development of the atomic bomb and a small growth of a nuclear power industry in the 1950s, was spending a lot of time looking for uranium. But uranium market began fading especially following the 3 Mile Island accident in the mid-1970s in Pennsylvania, where suddenly the future of nuclear power was not nearly as bright as it had been before that. So the mill closed down, the mines closed down, the town emptied out. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of families had to leave. People abandoned homes, things like that. At the same time, beginning around 1970, we saw the development following the 1960s of a kind of an urban move among more eccentric type of back to the land types. And Moab was one of the places that attracted some of those people. It had wide open spaces, it had very inexpensive housing. And so we attracted a growing, you'd call it a countercultural community. The main split up until the 1980s was uranium miners and industrial types versus the counterculturalists who were here and had a much more of an environmental ethic to the land. But they were both kind of small and they kind of coexisted to a certain degree. What changed things were two things. One was the significant growth of visitation at the local national parks throughout the West.
Yeah.
People traveling long distances to get to them. And also a lot of people who set up kind of a circuit where they fly into Las Vegas and drive to 7 or 8 national parks and then return to Las Vegas 2 weeks later. So that began developing, and what really changed the nature of Moab was mountain biking. We attracted a lot of recreation-oriented people who wanted to live a lifestyle based on their activities, not on their work. And the difference is if you work in a power plant, you're making $30 an hour, and if you work at a bike shop, you're making $10 an hour. You know, $14,000 or $15,000 a year is the difference between buying a home or sending a kid to college. Or
What is the year-round population?
the year-round population of the city of Moab is around 5,000 people.
Peak influx adds what to that?
On weekends, we'll have 10 or 15,000 people coming in. And in the winter, things close down significantly. It creates a problem with police, for example. Normally you may need 3 or 4 police, but on weekends you need 10 or 12. Well, what do you do with those 8 cops? Until now, we've always had a pretty good supply of fresh water coming from the LaSalle Mountains. As things get drier, and they have been getting drier, and there's reason to believe it could get drier in the future, we don't know how much rainfall we'll have or how much snowfall we'll have in the future. It will end up costing us more in the future to meet the needs of people who don't live here. It's kind of ironic that we have a town where much of the recreation is supported by people who have a strong environmental ethic. But one of the ways they promote that environmental ethic is encouraging people from Europe to get on planes and fly here and then rent cars. But the real impact of that type of economy is on the people who live here. You can work very hard in the spring and fall, but maybe you're not needed on Tuesday or Wednesday in the spring because the crowds are down. And you're certainly not needed in January or early February or even in December in some cases. So you develop a workforce that is not secure.
I'm about to leave Moab, and originally I thought I might head south from here to Kayenta, the Navajo Nation. But Navajo Parks and Rec have vetoed the idea. Instead, I'm going to be pushing on into southwestern Colorado. There's also currently a winter storm warning out. According to the National Weather Service, the winter storm warning means, quote, significant amounts of snow are expected or occurring, strong winds and blowing snow are also possible. This will make travel very hazardous or impossible.